555 UAVs in one night, nearly 200 reportedly aimed toward Moscow. And a strategic oil refinery inside Russia's capital was set on fire, while Moscow's air defenses were on high alert. This was not a normal drone raid. On the night of June 17th to 18th, 2026, Ukraine reportedly launched one of its largest drone attacks against Russian territory. The targets were not only near the front line, they reached into the area Moscow sees as the political and security center of the Russian state. The danger is bigger than the fire at Kapotnya. If relatively low-cost UAVs can force Russia to activate layers of defense around the capital, including systems such as Pantsir, S-300, S-400, and electronic warfare assets, then the question is clear. Can Moscow's layered shield still protect strategic targets in the age of mass drones? Stay with us and get the full picture, because this strike is not only about Moscow. It is about the future of modern war, where a swarm of unmanned aircraft can force a nuclear power to spend expensive missiles just to defend its own sky. But the biggest question is still ahead. Has Ukraine really found a weakness in Russia's air defense system? Or is this only the opening stage of a far more dangerous war of aerial exhaustion? This attack drew attention first because of its scale. According to the Russian Ministry of Defense, air defense forces had to deal with 555 Ukrainian UAVs during the night of June 17th to 18th. That figure comes from the Russian side and cannot be independently confirmed in full, but even by itself it shows how intense the operation was. The story was not about a single drone slipping through the border. It was about large numbers of aircraft appearing across multiple directions at nearly the same time and forcing Russia to react across a huge area. As the night unfolded, air raid alerts and defensive activity spread across several regions. Moscow quickly became the center of attention. Russian officials stated that nearly 200 UAVs were heading toward the capital region. This immediately turned the operation into something much larger than a strike against a military facility near the front. The focus shifted to the question of whether the most protected city in Russia could handle such pressure for hours without interruption. What made the situation unusual was the pace of events. Reports from different regions suggested that air defense crews were not dealing with one wave and then returning to normal operations. New targets continued to appear while earlier threats were still being tracked. Radar operators, command centers, missile crews, and electronic warfare units all faced the same problem at once. Every contact on a screen had to be identified. Every flight path had to be analyzed. Every decision had to be made quickly because delays could allow a target to move closer to an important site. This is where the operation appears to have achieved one of its main goals. The challenge was not simply to destroy targets. The challenge was to create pressure. A large city like Moscow contains government facilities, energy infrastructure, transport hubs, military locations, industrial sites, and residential areas. Air defense commanders cannot protect everything with the same priority. They must constantly decide what matters most at any given moment. When many threats arrive at once, those decisions become harder and riskier. The picture becomes even more complicated when the Russian cannot immediately determine which objects are dangerous and which are meant to distract attention. A UAV moving toward one sector may be the real threat. Another may exist mainly to pull radar coverage and interceptors away from a more valuable target. That means every response carries a cost. Firing too early may waste resources. Waiting too long may create a gap. Sending assets to the wrong area may leave another location exposed. This is why the number 555 matters beyond the headline. The figure represents workload. It represents pressure on operators. It represents hours of continuous monitoring and rapid decision-making. A modern air defense network is powerful, but it is still run by people who must process information under stress. The larger the number of incoming targets becomes, the harder it is to maintain perfect awareness across every sector. For those who follow military affairs, an important question emerges from this event. If a city protected by some of Russia's most advanced defensive systems must work this hard against a UAV attack, how secure are military facilities located farther from the center of that network? Leave a comment with your thoughts. Does the figure of 555 UAVs reflect the growing strike capability of Ukraine? Or does it mainly reflect Russia's effort to show how many targets were intercepted? Yet the most important part of this story is not how many UAVs entered Russian airspace. The more important question is what happened to the aircraft that managed to get through and where they were heading when they reached their targets. The most important target of this raid was not a trench, a depot near the front, or a small military base. It was the Kapotnya oil refinery in southeastern Moscow, one of the key energy facilities serving the Russian capital. This made the strike far more serious than a normal drone impact. Kapotnya is not just another industrial site on the edge of a city. It is part of the fuel system that helps Moscow function every day. The facility is reported to supply around 40% of the gasoline used in the Moscow region and about 50% of its diesel. That means a fire there is not only a local emergency, it is a direct strike against one of the main arteries that keeps the capital moving. As the attack unfolded, footage and reports from the area showed dark smoke rising from the refinery zone. That image carried a message larger than the fire itself. Moscow has long been presented as protected, controlled, and far away from the worst parts of the war. Yet a UAV strike reaching a major energy site inside the capital region challenged that image in a very public way. It showed that Ukraine is not only looking for targets near the front line. Kyiv is now reaching into the systems that support Russia from the rear. The choice of Kapotnya also reveals the logic behind Ukraine's wider campaign. Fuel is not just a civilian product. It moves buses, trucks, emergency vehicles, and industrial machines, but it also supports military movement. Diesel is especially important because it powers heavy transport, railway systems, logistics vehicles, and many machines that support war operations. If that flow is disrupted, the effect can spread beyond the refinery fence. This does not mean one strike can shut down Russia's war machine overnight. A large state has reserves, alternate supply channels, and emergency procedures. Moscow can reroute fuel, draw from storage, and move resources from other facilities. But that is exactly where the strategic pressure begins. Every adjustment costs time. Every rerouting plan needs transport capacity. Every repair effort consumes skilled labor, parts, security, and coordination. A refinery fire may look like one event, but the response can pull attention and resources away from other needs. For Ukraine, this is a way to attack Russia's war effort without trying to win every battle at the front. Instead of only striking tanks or artillery positions, Kyiv is hitting the material base behind them. A refinery supports transport. Transport supports supply. Supply supports troops. Troops support attacks. When one link is damaged, the entire chain becomes harder to manage, even if it does not break at once. This kind of pressure is slow, but it can be powerful. It does not always produce a dramatic battlefield map. It may not show a city changing hands, but it can force Russia to spend more money, move more carefully, and protect more sites at the same time. If refineries, fuel depots, pumping stations, and storage hubs are struck repeatedly, Moscow must defend not only the front, but also the economic system behind the front. That is why Kapotnya matters. The target was energy, but the message was military and political. Ukraine was showing that a deep strike can reach a facility tied to the daily life of the capital and the logistics of a long war. Moscow is not an easy target because it is protected by one of Russia's densest air defense networks. Moscow's wider defensive network has been described as including systems such as Pantsir, S-300, and S-400 batteries, with Pantsir systems also publicly identified on rooftops. Pantsir systems are used closer in, especially against low-flying drones and missiles near important sites. Electronic warfare units add another layer by trying to jam navigation, disrupt control links, or confuse incoming UAVs before they reach their final path. Some Panzer systems have even been placed on rooftops and high buildings in the Moscow area. That detail matters. It shows that Russian planners understand one basic problem of urban air defense. A low-flying drone can hide behind the shape of the city, the curve of the ground, and the radar shadows created by buildings. By moving sensors and launchers higher, Russia tries to see farther and react earlier. But even that does not remove the core difficulty. The hard part is not only shooting down a drone, the hard part is finding the right target fast enough. A large missile or aircraft would give defenders a clearer signal. It is bigger, faster, and usually easier to classify. A small UAV is different. It can fly low. It can move slowly. It may have a limited radar signature. It may follow a route that avoids the strongest detection zones. When many of these objects appear from different directions, the defense network must sort them while the clock is running. That is where Ukraine's method becomes dangerous. The reported attack did not place Moscow under pressure with one clean line of approach. It created a wider problem. UAVs were moving across different regions, and nearly 200 were reportedly directed toward the capital area. In that environment, Russian crews had to watch the sky, protect key sites, and decide which tracks needed immediate action. A wrong call could mean wasting an interceptor, or allowing a more dangerous drone to continue. This is the essence of saturation. Ukraine does not need every UAV to survive. The goal may be to make the defense system spend attention, missiles, radar time, and command focus across too many threats at once. Some aircraft may be intended to strike. Others may be used to stretch the network. Some may force radars to turn on and reveal their activity. Others may draw fire away from the real path. For Russian operators, the situation becomes a chain of fast decisions. Fire too much, and expensive missiles are consumed against low-cost targets. Wait too long, and a UAV may reach a refinery, airport zone, power site, or government area. Classify the wrong object as the main threat, and the actual strike platform may pass through the gap created by that mistake. This is not a simple contest between one drone and one missile. It is a battle between timing and decision-making. The economics also matter. A modern air defense missile can cost far more than the UAV it destroys. That does not mean Russia can ignore the threat, because one drone that reaches a sensitive facility can cause damage far beyond its price. This forces the defender into an uncomfortable position. They must spend high-value weapons, keep crews on alert, and protect a large urban area against machines that may be much cheaper to produce. This is why the Moscow raid matters beyond the number of drones shot down. It tested the ability of a layered shield to stay calm under a crowded sky. It showed that a strong air defense system can still face pressure when the attacker brings mass, low-altitude routes, and multiple directions into the same night. So who has the advantage now? The side with expensive air defense missiles, or the side that can keep producing large numbers of cheaper UAVs? The answer is not simple, but the raid on Moscow shows that the balance is shifting. The Moscow raid shows that Ukraine is pushing the war deeper into Russia's rear, not just fighting along the front line. For much of the war, public attention has focused on places like Donetsk, Zaporizhia, Kherson, and the long contact line where soldiers fight for towns, roads, trenches, and ruined industrial zones. That front still matters. But this strike points to a second battlefield that is becoming harder for Russia to ignore. It is the battlefield of refineries, storage sites, factories, airports, rail links, and command areas far from the trenches. The logic is simple, but its effects can be serious. Ukraine does not have to move troops hundreds of kilometers forward to create pressure inside Russia. Long-range UAVs allow Kiev to reach places where Moscow produces, stores, moves, and protects the resources needed for war. A strike on an energy facility can force emergency crews into action. A threat to an airport can delay movement and trigger security measures. A hit near an industrial zone can make managers, police, air defense crews, and regional officials respond at the same time. This changes the meaning of a safe rear area. In older thinking, distance created protection. A city far from the front could keep working while the army fought elsewhere. A factory deep inside national territory could send equipment forward without feeling much of the war at home. But drones have narrowed that distance. If an energy site in Moscow can be attacked, then other facilities across Russia must assume they could also become targets. That does not mean every deep strike will change the war by itself. Russia is large, and it has many routes, facilities, and layers of security. Moscow can repair damage, shift supplies, increase patrols, and move extra defense assets around the country. But each response creates a new burden. More guards are needed. More radar coverage must be maintained. More air defense units may have to protect refineries, depots, airports, and plants that were once considered far behind the danger zone. The timing also matters. This raid did not happen in a quiet war. Russia has continued to strike Ukrainian cities with missiles and UAVs, and Kiev has framed its deep attacks as part of a wider response. Moscow's response also shows how dangerous this phase can become. Russian officials threatened larger group strikes after the raid, which means both sides may move further into a cycle of long-range attacks. Ukraine wants to raise the price of Russia's invasion by targeting the systems behind it. Russia wants to punish Ukraine and show that it still controls the pace of escalation. Between those two aims, the war expands outward. This is the key shift. The battlefield is no longer limited to a few eastern and southern regions of Ukraine. It now stretches into the economic and political depth of Russia itself. Fuel facilities, industrial sites, transport hubs, and airspace over major cities are becoming part of the conflict map. That forces Moscow to defend more territory, not just more soldiers. Do deep strikes like this push Russia closer to negotiations? Or do they make the Kremlin more likely to answer with heavier attacks? Leave your thoughts in the comments, because this is one of the central questions of the next stage of the war. This raid may be remembered as a clear example of the biggest trend in modern warfare. Relatively cheap drones can force extremely expensive defense systems to remain active night after night. The logic behind this change is surprisingly simple. A single UAV may cost far less than the missile used to intercept it. Yet the defender cannot afford to ignore it. If only one aircraft reaches an oil refinery, power facility, airport, military base, or command center, the consequences can be serious. That creates a difficult situation for the side under attack. Every incoming object must be tracked. Every possible threat must be investigated. Every alert requires attention. The cost is not measured only in missiles. Radar stations must remain active. Air defense crews must stay ready. Command centers must process information continuously. Electronic warfare teams must search for signals and react quickly. Maintenance crews must keep systems operating. Even when a drone is destroyed, resources have already been spent. In many cases, the attacker forces costs onto the defender before the target area is ever reached. The Moscow raid highlighted this reality. The operation was not only about striking a refinery or reaching the capital, it was also about forcing one of the world's largest air defense networks to remain under pressure for hours. Every approaching UAV created another decision. Every decision carried consequences. The challenge was no longer whether Russia possessed advanced defensive weapons. The challenge was whether those weapons could manage large numbers of threats appearing across a wide area at nearly the same time. This is why drone warfare is becoming much more than a contest between aircraft. Success increasingly depends on production, planning, intelligence, software, targeting data, communications, and the ability to repeat attacks over long periods. A country that can manufacture large numbers of drones and launch them regularly may create pressure far beyond the cost of the systems themselves. The goal is not always immediate destruction. Sometimes the goal is to force the opponent into a cycle of constant reaction. Ukraine appears determined to prove exactly that point. By expanding domestic drone production and developing longer-range strike capabilities, Kyiv is showing that a smaller military power can still create strategic problems for a larger opponent. A refinery, airport, logistics hub, or industrial facility does not need to be completely destroyed to become a concern. Once a location enters the target list, it often requires additional protection, more planning, and greater spending. The lesson is not being watched only in Moscow or Kyiv. Military planners across NATO and other major powers are studying these events carefully. If a city protected by layered defenses can still face sustained UAV pressure, then every future conflict may require a different approach to security. Air bases, ports, power stations, industrial centers, and government facilities may need protection systems designed specifically for mass drone attacks rather than traditional missile threats alone. Recent support packages from Western countries, including additional drones and air defense equipment for Ukraine, suggest that unmanned systems are no longer viewed as secondary weapons. They are becoming central tools of modern military strategy. That is why this story is not really about Kapotnya, Moscow, or even the reported figure of 555 UAVs. Those are important details, but they point toward a larger question. The real test is whether defense systems designed for the threats of an earlier era can adapt quickly enough to a battlefield increasingly shaped by large numbers of low-cost unmanned aircraft. And from that point forward, the final question no longer belongs only to Russia. It belongs to every major power that still believes distance alone is enough to keep its rear areas safe. The Moscow UAV raid should not be seen as one isolated night of explosions. It may be a warning that the war is entering a new phase, where the rear is no longer fully safe. Air defense is no longer facing only jets and large missiles, and energy sites can become strategic targets before sunrise. Ukraine did not need tanks near Moscow to create pressure. Kyiv used drones, timing, numbers, and scattered flight paths to force Russia to activate a large and expensive defense system around its own capital. Even if Russia claims most UAVs were intercepted, the fact that key targets were still threatened is enough to change the way Moscow thinks about security. The most important question now may not be how fast Russia can repair Kapotnya. The deeper question is how many air defense systems Moscow may need to pull back from other areas, how long Ukraine can keep launching deep strikes, and whether Western countries will invest even more in Ukraine's long-range drone power. If these raids continue, Russia may have to defend the front and the rear at the same time. But will this pressure push Putin toward negotiation, or will it drive the Kremlin into harsher retaliation? That answer is still open. Leave your thoughts in the comments, and if you want more clear analysis on weapons, battles, and the geopolitical shocks shaping today's war, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Military Force.